everyone, hope you're keeping well. Thank you for joining me again. Today we're going to take a bit of a break from our traditional style. You know, originally we were looking at 2 White Dwarfs in an episode 10 years apart, a decade apart. Then we went to looking at 2 White Dwarfs 5 years apart, so that I could look at one from my childhood that was 5 years on from that and do everything without making a really long video. But the next 3 weeks we're going to do things slightly differently. We're going to look at 1 issue per week, and the reason that we're going to do that is that all 3 of these issues are quite big, have a lot of content, and I don't really want to rush through that content because it's good. I feel like this is White Dwarf at its very best, at its most inspiring, at its least catalogue-y. Well, no, maybe not its least catalogue-y. It's still a bit catalogue-y, but there's actual content and actual meat to them as well, and I feel like I want to do them justice. This is not going to be an ongoing thing. I'm going to go back to doing 2 in one and then a childhood one in the following, but for these ones, because there is quite a bit in there, I wanted to do it this way. So make sure that you hit the like button, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure that you hit the notifications button so that you'll be told when the next episode drops. And we're going to start working our way through from 1987. So July 1987, let's take a look. Okay then, let us do this thing. I just moved these out of the way. I bought a couple of extra patches given the things that are going on in the world at the moment. I thought I should put these patches on my jacket, so I need to sew those in place ready for Bring Out Your Ledge, just in case you thought this was a strip of particularly weird looking green stuff. It's not, obviously it's a Ukrainian patch. Get those out of the way and let's have a look at White Dwarf 91 here. This wonderful Blood Royale cover here, a Chris Achilleos cover. I remember seeing this image before I knew it had anything to do with Blood Royale. I don't know if it was done for Blood Royale or whether it was an existing piece that they just used as the cover. But I remember thinking that this looked like a very fantasy piece. This guy down here, you can't really see what's going on under his helmet, but I had associated this guy with the guy in the 3rd edition rulebook, which lets me see how I've got one here ready to hand. Let me see if I can flick through. This guy here, and also he's in one of the bigger coloured spreads. This guy here. So to my mind, this guy and this guy, these are the same person, and because this guy's got horns. I know they're not the same. They're going downwards, not upwards, and they're not nearly as big. But because he's got horns on his helmet, and similar kind of padded leather and gauntlets and an axe on his shield, and what you could read as a kind of skull image on the front of his head. That this to me was like, oh well, that's the same character, but here he's getting his comeuppance at the hands of some imperial knight. And in the background here you've got this guy with a horned or winged, possibly more like winged. This guy's certainly horned. This one looks, it's got a bit of a kind of Saracen look to the chainmail coif around it. This guy's got a very kind of Viking looking. This didn't look like to me a sort of historical medieval image, and I guess it being Chris Achilleos it probably isn't, but it's supposed to represent Blood Royale, as we shall find out, which is a historical, pseudo-historical, but definitely not fantasy board game. There it is, Blood Royale. So that's what it's supposed to look like, but that obviously wasn't what I thought in my head. Dungeon layers, lovely dungeon layers. An interesting source book for the Dragonlance Chronicles, based around the Inn of the Last Home, that setting for the launch of the Dragonlance Chronicles, which has got all kinds of recipes and song scores for playing the songs from this. Very odd book that, but I guess if you've run out of other things to write about because you've written about Dragonlance for such a long time, that eventually you've got to come down to that minutiae. We've got some new Citadel miniatures released, some wonderful names here. Did you know that the snotlings from this original release, yes, these are the first snotlings, I believe, that they all had names: Jag, Beat, Sneck, Jab, Balg, Throm, Gim, Stug, Smit, Shaman, okay, that's not a name, Glup, Hev, She-Snot, Sick, Puff, Heg, Sar, or SAA, Baz, Slick, Spet, Ret, and then the big ones that you might be more familiar with: Big Snot, Hit, Hick, Gidney Up, Pot, and High Spy. These two, obviously Big Snot and Pot, and the High Spy actually being quite rare snotlings, very valuable snotlings, and some of these being very popular characters that continued with variants in the range for a really, really long time. I love this guy Balg here with his ball and chain, obviously trying to be a snotling fanatic on the go, and I love that you have snotling shamans as well. So yes, lovely range here. The goblins also here have names: Aklob, Shrig, Biglub, Dothblock, Grut, Sargob, Dimlig, Spixto, Umbag, Badag. The Gothic horror, it's more your role, and that is true of these dwarf villagers as well. You've got the jailer, the lady, the elder, grumpy, militia, the drunkard, the guard, the thinker, the off-to-bed, the town crier, the mountaineer, the thug, the landlord, the peasant, the merchant, and the chaos ninja zombie dwarf. Definitely a villager there, the chaos ninja zombie dwarf. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame that these guys don't have their names, but I guess it makes sense to badge them as what they are. Some more critical mass. Here we are having a look at the actual mythos, the Lovecraft mythos. So with relation to Call of Cthulhu and the kind of things that have had an impact on the way that the mythos is told in Call of Cthulhu, but really a look at what Lovecraft was getting at when he was writing the mythos, where it came from, his kind of feelings, his thoughts, the themes behind the mythos as a whole, to help the person running Call of Cthulhu get a bit more of the right atmosphere into it. And this is a very good overview by Simon Nicholson of Lovecraft's writings, his kind of paranoia, his accepting of his sense of sort of racism. Let's not call it anything else. His racism, and his other quirks and things that were causing him to have reservations about his life. But what I really like down here is where it's brutally honest, and it says H.P. Lovecraft was not a great writer. His characters are two-dimensional at best, his various protagonists indistinguishable, the plots of his stories often rely on revelatory shock horror endings or are simply non-existent. His narrative style is atrocious. The reader has to wade through adjective after adjective of florid prose where everything is fetid, blasphemous, eldritch and cyclopean. I think it's very honest, and I feel the same way about Lovecraft. I don't know, some people would probably hold Lovecraft up to be an amazing author, but he wrote sort of trashy teen fiction for articles in magazines, didn't he? So it's not, he's no great literist, but what this does recognise is that his great contribution to the literary genre was the creation of the mythos into which other people have fed since. So getting to grips with what he was actually intending to do with the mythos is quite an important aspect. We have a look at Fumbles in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. If you are familiar at all with Stormbringer, which I have been running a little bit of, and RuneQuest, you'll know that there are fumble tables, things that you can do to really negatively affect what you've done in combat. And so Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has this as well as an antidote to the critical hits table. So if you want to know just how badly you've done, there's all kinds of things that you can roll on. So like the non-gunpowder missile weapons table, it sort of starts off with just so the lowest result is always kind of doing yourself personal injury, in this case shooting yourself in the foot literally, and then the biggest thing that you can roll for is that you've dropped your weapon, or you dropped your ammunition or something, and it's going to take you a turn to pick up. So this is whenever you roll a double, so the higher the double that you roll, the better the result of the fumble. The lower that you roll, the more you have fumbled, quite entertainingly. Thrud gets a makeover to put himself in line with the Mad Max biker gangs, and then goes back to the pub. Here's an interesting piece from David Langford. It's a story. It's a story of territorial civil war in rural England after a nuclear conflict. The fallout of a nuclear conflict has gone down, and people have emerged to the surface in a kind of medieval state and are claiming their kingship regions back. And it doesn't relate to anything else. It's just a story. It's quite interesting. It's amusing, an amusing story. A light-hearted look at a very serious situation. Derek the Troll continues, also bringing a light-hearted look here. The terrible, what are they called? The demons of the dim dimension. There you go. These terrible beings are attacking the keep in which Derek the Troll is living, and so Derek the Troll decides that he's going to sort them out. So he goes out and he brings in some aid from the kidney men of Calgore, the carnivorous colon of Castlewick, the barbaric bladder beasts from beyond, and the pancreas women of Perlinia. The punchline, of course, being that it takes a lot of guts, but to face the demons of the dim dimensions. There you go. Bob Ollie is launching out on his own here with the beginnings of the Iron Claw range, that very distinctive style of Bob Ollie sculpting that was maybe not quite fitting with the rest of the Citadel fold, but nevertheless he was going to branch out as Marauder Miniatures did, and as Nick Lund did with his Chronicle miniatures as well, and have his own branch of miniatures within the fold, which is fun. Here we have a Dungeons and Dragons adventure from Carl Sargent, based around the premise of a disinherited son who is forced to shoulder the blame for his obviously totally innocent brother's activities, and who then seeks to wreak a terrible revenge upon his family with the help of a renegade elf beast mistress and a pride of lions, hence matter of pride. So the adventurers are sent off to deal with these lions that have been killing the livestock, in the hope that they will then find the truth of what is going on. And of course there are goblins involved. And then you get through the goblin caves into this concealed valley in which the renegade elf is hiding. And then there are a number of ways, depending on whether you want there to be a reconciliatory ending to it, or whether you want there to be a vindictive ending to it. Depends how you want to play it out. There's scope for doing all different ways to round that adventure up. Here is a Paranoia adventure, because we love Paranoia adventures. At least Marcus Rowland loves Paranoia adventures. This one is a little less weird than the previous ones, but it is certainly no less hazardous. The little lost warbot, by the way, is not so little, and also it turns out not so lost, but definitely a warbot, which has fallen into the clutches of some other warbots that might be recognisable to some. They run around a lot and they shout "exterminate" quite a lot, and they've got flashing lights on their heads, but they're also wearing ponchos and scarves and Mexican hats, because yes, that's right, they're Mexican Daleks are behind the case of the missing warbot, and they have got another task for the troubleshooters to undertake, because the Mexican Daleks are outlaw Daleks, they're bandito Daleks, and you have to put on all kinds of terrible cliched and definitely politically incorrect Mexican accents in order to portray them as they wage war against the actual regular Dalek authorities, with the help of course, the warbot, and then have to rescue it and take it back, otherwise the computer will be mean at. Got some nice ranges here, C-17 Skeletons range. Some oddities here. I like the digger, the one coming out of the ground. I don't think I've ever seen him before. But also some absolute classics, like this guy, the soldier here, absolute classic. This guy, the Reaper with his scythe, he's a classic. This guy here, who's listed as a centurion, don't know, got his very sort of medieval pot helm on, which is cool. And then you've got Rambones, the iconic Rambones there with his machine gun. Definitely a fantasy figure there, back from the days when there was a sense of humour. And the Feudals range, which again I will be familiar with a lot of these from the Citadel Combat Cards deck, like Sir Edmund Duloc painted him recently for the Combat Cards deck. Lord Chase painted him recently. There are a few others here. There are some here that are, he says, looking... I thought there was one here that was painted differently. Maybe that's somewhere else in this episode. Baron Gizbar here is also differently named, of course, but in the Combat Cards deck, but with a different shield, which is interesting. Don't know if that had come off and they'd replaced it with another one, or they repainted it at some point. But yeah, a lot of these guys still available, of course, from Foundry, should you wish to stock up on feudals, and who doesn't. Here's a look with Paul Cockburn and Jim Bambra and Phil Gallagher, great names there, at Nobility and Royalty in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. The noble career, of course, being slightly different from the other careers in that you can't really just choose to go into that. You can't decide, right, I'm going to be a noble. Well, maybe you can decide, right, I'm going to be a noble. And in fact, this article says that you can, but there is a very definite way that you have to go about it. You have to find a patron. You have to endear yourself to the patron by performing noble deeds, ingratiate your way into their household, hopefully marry into their household, because that will solidify your position. And then you have to have all of the trappings, because there are no impoverished nobles, in order to become a knight. So it's a long and arduous task to become a noble, unless you're born into the aristocracy. But that's as it should be, and if you wanted to do that, now you can. Here is a look at public order in the sort of 1920s up to 1960s for use in Call of Cthulhu, particularly within Green and Pleasant Land, the British Isles Call of Cthulhu supplement book. And it looks at public disrest, riots, picket lines, the trade union movement, kinds of various ways in which civic disobedience, civil unrest was dealt with by the authorities, just as a source record, really, for you to use to fit your own stories around. Because of course the things that are reported by the news, that's not what is really going on, is it? There's really some other, definitely mythos root behind all of these instances of civil disobedience. Tim Pollard here, the wonderful Tim Pollard, is narrating the events of the Liverpool opening, Games Workshop opening. I mean, look at this queue, right? Can you imagine any shop opening these days that would have a queue this long to get in on the first day? No, I can't. Lots of people were there. So Ken Rolston was there, Steve Jackson was there, Ian Livingston was there, Brian Ansell was there. 3,000 people visited the shop on the first day. Can you imagine? Again, never mind it being a game shop or anything of that ilk. Can you imagine a shop these days opening and getting 3,000 people through its door on the first day. That's just insane. And the next one coming up is Derby, so maybe there'll be another 3,000 people coming through Derby. This, of course, being a time of expansion, not that many shops, but definitely opening with great rapidity around this period. Character generation in Pendragon. So we have talked about, or we've looked a little bit about joining the nobility in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. This is a little bit more about how the knightly virtues work in Pendragon, and it looks at some difficulties within the system, identifies some good points, some bad points, and suggests a few changes for the Games Master to make when creating player characters, just to either make things easier or to avoid a character that's basically unplayable in game or disinteresting. So it allows a few more choices than the standard random generation for Pendragon. Here is an heavy metal article, a very early heavy metal article with John Blanche and Rick Priestley, of course. Here's your range of tools that you need to assemble your Citadel miniatures back in the day, and here's John Blanche showing his abilities with a scalpel, or his love of self-harm, I don't know which. Here are some lovely painted, of course, Citadel miniatures, and a discussion as to how to assemble and clean and prep your models ready for painting, along with this Mugs Brigade of, or what should we call it, Rogues Gallery of the heavy metal team at that time. Dave Andrews, Sid, Mike McVeigh and Colin Dixon. All of them looking extremely dubious, extremely studious, and very young. And then this, prepping an orc war wyvern, so putting its wings together, adding extra warts and bits and pieces, and smoothing together the joins with milliput to be a seamless thing. And I remember this being used in quite a lot of the painting and modelling guides for probably a good decade afterwards, even long after this ceased to be the current wyvern model. This, in articles in White Dwarf and in painting guides, this would still be the definitive how to fill gaps. This sequence of 3 here in particular, how to fill gaps in your model. I don't know if this was a particularly gappy model, or they were just really pleased with how thinly they filled it, or whether they just thought, well, we've got one, we don't need to do another one, we'll just keep reprinting it, which is entirely reasonable. Blood on the Snow, as advertised on the cover. A complete Warhammer battle. This one for potentially 4 players, should you wish, plus a Games Master. I have heard it described as a prelude to Macbeth. I don't know that it strictly is, but it is orcs versus goblins, that is for sure. Sorry, orcs versus dwarves. Orcs and goblins, in fact, versus dwarves. And the setup, if I go straight to the scenario page, the map, there you go, the setup is thus. There is a dwarven outpost that has been taken over by orcs, and the orcs, of course, are not allowing the goblins into the outpost. They're far too meagerly to be allowed entrance to the outpost, so the goblins are all kind of camped around the outside here, in amongst the farmhouse walls and bits and pieces. And then the dwarves who fled from the outpost, or who returned to the outpost to find it infested with goblins, they have gone to find help, and they are returning, and their task is now to clear out the outpost of orcs. And I guess you would find that the dwarves would probably fight together fairly cooperatively, but that's not necessarily the case. There's some secret agenda stuff going on in here that means they might not be totally helpful to each other. But the goblins who've been stuck out in front of the outpost definitely have cause for complaint against the orcs. They probably wouldn't turn on the orcs, but they might try and run away and escape more than help the orcs out. And there is a special rule here: Gruzg's snowballs. Gruzg Blood Gobbler, who is the orc war chief, can throw bound dwarves over the battlements, and this all, as it's called Blood in the Snow, this all being a snowy battlefield. A dwarf thrown over the battlements of the outpost rolling down a snowy hill. What happens? Yes, they become a giant rolling snowball, and anything that they hit in their path gets totally decimated, including the poor dwarf on the inside. So there you go. The letters page here headed by Derek the Troll, because again there is yes, discussion as to whether Derek the Troll has a place in White Dwarf or not, or whether he's just too silly for the serious pages of White Dwarf. And there we are, on the back cover with Stormbringer. There we go, White Dwarf 91. Hope you enjoyed that quick flick through. Next time we're going to be looking at 5 years on, White Dwarf 151. Join us for that.